Welcome everyone to the Wyoming Women's Business Center's 2022 Business Education Webinar Series. This afternoon's presentation is 5 Ways to Treat Your Art Like a Business. My name is Jessica Brower and I am the Marketing Director here at the Wyoming Women's Business Center, and I'll be your speaker today. Before we get started, I want to point out the Zoom control panel, which is likely on the bottom of your screen, though it could be at the top. I want to go ahead and call attention to both the Q&A and the chat function. If you have any comments or questions during the webinar today, I'd like you to use those to communicate with me. And if you haven't yet, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. I'd love to know where you're joining us from and what kind of work you do. I had a great time combing through there and learning about who's on the call so far. This webinar is being recorded, and a link to access that recording via Zoom will be sent out to all registrants shortly after the live event today. So please feel free to share that link with your peers, your team, or your friends who you think would enjoy today's content. And always remember, you can re-reference that recording if there's something you miss or you need to catch again. If you're watching this webinar live, a survey will launch shortly after we close the presentation. If you could, please complete that, as it provides us and our funding partners with some really valuable information. And just as a reminder, all participants are muted today to minimize any background noise. So again, if you have any questions or comments during the presentation, which I really hope you do, please go ahead and type them into the chat box or the questions panel, and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. So just some quick information about the WWBC in case you aren't familiar already. We're a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to enable and empower Wyoming entrepreneurs with a special emphasis on women. We do that through 3 distinct programs. The first is our business counseling and training program, which is always free. That's what you're taking advantage of today. The second is our microloan program, which offers loans from $500 to $50,000 for businesses that have been denied from a traditional lending source. And third is our Artist Development Center that we run in conjunction with our Works of Wyoming store, which is here in downtown Laramie and also online. And what I really want to get across to you is that what we specialize in is called micro enterprises. So what is that? That's a business that has less than 6 employees. The majority are just 1 or 2 person businesses, probably like many of you on this call today. And these businesses were able to launch for under $35,000. So businesses like yoga studios, hairstylists, in-home daycare providers, marketing consultants, photographers, cleaning services, as well as artists and makers. These are all examples of our clients. So if you're not already a client of the WWBC and you'd like to be, it's quick and easy. You can sign up by going to wyomingwomen.org and clicking on that Sign Up Now button at the top of the page. One last note before we get started, I'd like to thank our presenting sponsor, the Wyoming Arts Council, for their contribution to the Wyoming Women's Business Center and the Works of Wyoming store. It's with their support for Wyoming's artists that we're able to offer this free education resource for you today. So let's go ahead and start this off with a quick poll just to feel out this virtual room that we're sharing. Okay, so a poll should have launched on your screen, and it's simply asking, do you consider yourself to be an entrepreneur? Now, you don't need to spend too much time thinking about this, just whatever pops into your mind immediately. Yes, for sure, that's me, I'm definitely an entrepreneur. Or no, that's not me, that's other people. Or, you know, I have no clue, I don't know. I'll give you just a few more seconds. It looks like we're still waiting for just a couple more answers. Awesome. So it looks like, fortunately, a lot of you, let me share these results. A lot of you think that you are, or know that you are entrepreneurs, which I'm so glad to hear. And just a handful said no, or I don't know. So regardless of how you identified yourself in that poll, what I really want to ensure you is that as an artist, you're also an entrepreneur. And I'm so happy to hear that so many of you already consider that. So often I chat with artists and find that they feel the business resources offered by the WWBC or other organizations throughout the state don't apply to them, or that the best practices for operating sales and marketing as an artist are different than those of a business. So while not all entrepreneurs are artists, I believe that all artists are entrepreneurs. According to a 2018 article with Entrepreneur Media, there are 5 characteristics that make an entrepreneur, and I was really excited about these. 1 is vision. You're able to imagine, create, and deliver on what exists in your mind's eye. 2, creativity. You're connected to your imagination and you're intrigued by what's unique, not afraid of it. 3, drive. You push through and do the work, whatever your work is. You come back to your art, to paint, to draw, to sculpt, to write, to perform, even when it's tough. 4, self-discipline. So this appears in many different forms. So maybe it's you showing up for your work again and again, trying to learn a new skill or to perfect your craft. Maybe you think before acting, you deliver on your promises, or you avoid what could lead to negative consequences or affect your goals with your work. And lastly, empathy. You're connected to or have an understanding of other individuals and what they're experiencing within. You can put yourself in the shoes of others and are connected by really listening and making choices from the heart. So I'd like to pause here and point out that not one of those characteristics are exclusive to humans working in specialized fields or product sales or service offerings. If you're an artist, you're an entrepreneur, and I'm sure that most all of you, if not all of you, identify with all 5 of these in the list. So that means you're in the right place, and we have plenty of resources for you, even beyond these 30 minutes we're spending this afternoon. So now that we've established that the rules do apply to you and your work, let's go ahead and hop into those 5 ways to treat your art like a business. So here's what we're going to go over for the remainder of our time together. 1, define your unique value. 2, cull your audience. Number 3, turn toward, not away from your financials. 4, always be connecting. And lastly, 5, reach for support. And remember, we will take some time for questions at the end. So feel free to type those in the Q&A section as they come up, and I promise we'll get to them. So number 1, define your unique value. Maybe you've heard this term before, a unique value proposition or a UVP. A unique value proposition is simply a concise, straight to the point statement about the benefits you offer your customers. So in other words, it's just a fancy term for what makes you different. So maybe you already have an artist statement, and if so, this could be a really great place to mine for your unique value proposition. And I think it's also important to note that you could be a little blind to your own unique value proposition. It could be really helpful to talk with your customers or collectors, the people who attend your shows, and even your friends and family about what their experience with your art looks like. You might be surprised what you find out. So you can ask yourself, what am I selling? Is it a product, a piece, or maybe it's more of an idea or an experience or a feeling? And what makes my work unique? How am I different? And why are those repeat customers or those people who are engaging with your work, why are they coming back? So here are some examples of unique value propositions. And I think the thing that's kind of fun about this is you really don't need to know what any of these companies are. So maybe you do, a lot of them are quite large companies, but their UVPs really kind of give you enough information to have an idea of what you're looking at. So Crazy Egg, which is a company I hadn't heard of before, website behavior tracking at an unbeatable price. From that UVP, I know, okay, clearly they're gathering analytic data from websites, and competitive pricing is really important to them. Slack, be more productive at work with less effort. HubSpot, tech you need to help your business grow effectively. And Uber, we're probably all familiar with this one, the smartest way to get around. So you can see here, these are very short statements. They're concise, but they give you an idea of what the person's offering. So here's an example. something I just threw together here. So which do you think is more clear to the customer? At the top here, we have unique pottery by Pete. Okay, so this tells me that a person named Pete makes something with clay. That's cool, I like that. And it does at least tell me what I can expect. Pete isn't painting watercolors, he's making pottery. Or made with love stoneware, tough enough for the whole family. This tells me more. Now I know, okay, it's likely handcrafted to have that made with love tag on it. Durability in design and materials was important to this maker. And they're likely designing sets or pieces to be used in a family setting. So with that, now I know if this seems like a business that I want to explore as a shopper, or if it's not the right fit for me. And that's not bad to let customers know that, you know what, we're not a good fit for each other. And that brings me to number 2, cull your audience. One of the most common mistakes I see in business strategy is casting too wide of a net. And by this, I mean stating, my ideal customer is anyone who buys from me, or my ideal customer lives in the state of Wyoming, but sometimes they live in Colorado and Utah and Montana. With such large parameters, the efficacy of your marketing and outreach is really diminished. However, as you start to hone in on who your customer is and who your customer is not, you're able to cultivate more pointed conversations and foster really rich, deep connections between you and the people who are buying from you. So when I say cull your audience, I really do mean define a smaller, more resonant pool of people and let go of the rest. And I know this can be really scary. So you can do this by defining things like, where do they live? How much money do they make? What does their family structure look like? Do they have children? Do they not? These are all really helpful, but then you can start to dive deeper. How do they spend their money? Are they passionate about supporting local, or are they chronic Amazon shoppers? What problems are they running into? Are they looking for something different when what they're finding? And I think art of any kind folds into this really well. So just a personal example, I'm born and raised in Wyoming, and I love to decorate my home in regional art to buy from people who I know live in the same state as me. However, I'm not big on traditional Western style. So the problem I'm running into is I want Wyoming art and I don't want it to have cowboy hats or horseshoes. I know there are plenty of artists out there who can solve that problem for me. And lastly, maybe you could ask, what are their personal values? Maybe they're passionate about the environment or reproductive rights or historic preservation. It can be a big thing or a small thing, but these details help connect you to the people who understand, respect, and appreciate your art. So how do you get to know your audience? 1, for basic information, use the analytic tools available on your website and social media profiles. This won't give you highly specific information, but it can certainly help you answer those big initial questions, like what city are your followers living in? Number 2, you engage in genuine conversation with your customers or those who express interest in you and your work. There's a lot to be learned from simply getting to know your customers. 3, similarly, pay attention to the kinds of people who are drawn to purchase from you. What patterns are you starting to notice? And lastly, ask. Surveys and polls are a really great way to gather data, but also a simple question does just fine too. So with that, I'm going to launch another poll. Okay, how would you rate your relationship to managing your financials for your art business? 5 is I feel very comfortable and familiar. 3 is right in the middle, you're neutral. Or 1, I don't feel comfortable at all. And again, whatever is your initial gut reaction is all we need here. I don't want anybody to stress too much. Give you just a few more moments. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end this, share these results. So it looks like about 13% of you feel very comfortable and familiar with your financials. 26% are at a 4, 35% are neutral, 9% at a 2, and 17% do not feel comfortable at all. So we're pretty well represented, especially here in that kind of, I don't know, in between stage. So number 3 is turn toward your financials and not away from them. And in preparation for this, I reached out to a friend and a former colleague who is a CPA and owner of Capital Clarity, an accounting firm here in Laramie. And if you took part of the COVID support program, maybe you had the opportunity to work with him too. So I asked him, what are the very first recommendations you make to creatives when they come to you in terms of their finances? And this is what he shared with me. He said, open a separate bank account for art-related income and expenses. This way, come the end of the year, it's easy to decide whether to report the income as a business or a hobby because all of that activity is contained to a single account. Additionally, this helps to keep an eye on what you're spending versus what you're making in one spot instead of having it mixed in with your personal finances. And all of this is going to be hugely important when it comes to pricing your work. The second thing Derek told me was keep track of any mileage from driving to shows, fairs, exhibits, wherever you may be going. This deduction can come in really handy come tax time, but it's really hard to recreate at the end of the year if you're not keeping track. And number 3, consider all of the costs as you start and grow your business. Oftentimes, it's easy to overlook certain costs and expenses because they seem incidental or, like a one-time thing. But these things can really add up and they need to be accounted for, again, especially when you're pricing that finished product or service that you're offering. So examples of these costs to look out for are things like your materials and supplies. What are you making your work with? Maybe you rent studio space. Maybe you rent or purchase special equipment, and you likely have to maintain that equipment, and that comes with expenses. There's costs on how you advertise, costs in travel. Maybe you're attending education or training opportunities and the costs with that. Additionally, maybe there's fees from your website or wherever you're selling at. Maybe that's PayPal or Square, or Etsy, Shopify. There's a million different places it could be coming from. But it's really important to know where your money is going so you can set yourself up for success. Number 4, always be connecting. So maybe you've heard this sales mantra, always be closing. This phrase, popularized in the early 90s, states that the seller must always be in this mindset of closing deals, using whatever tactics are necessary. And I've counseled enough artists on business to know that for many, perhaps yourself included, being salesy is not on the table. You're not going to entertain that idea. And I know that. So instead, I've reframed and changed that C to always be connecting. One of the best ways to support the growth of your business is to keep an ear to the ground for opportunities and to leave room in your schedule for connecting with others within your community. You never know what partnership, connection, or unexpected project can come from taking time to attend a networking luncheon or connect with another artist who inspires you over a cup of coffee or Zoom. So you've probably heard about the importance of an elevator pitch. I invite you to reframe that idea of a high pressure pitch in a crowded elevator into something that feels less like sales and more like connecting authentically with people and organizations and businesses in your community and field of work that you're drawn to. There's no need here for closing, but instead, what if you were just open? Lastly, 5, reach for support. I think this could be one of the most important topics on entrepreneurship and one of the ones that receives far too little airtime. You do not have to know how to do everything. I'm going to say that again. You, as the owner of your business and the maker of your work, do not have to possess the skill set to do it all on your own. The most successful of entrepreneurs and the most successful of artists have benefited from those moments where they knew they needed to reach for support, and they did. So whether you reach for tools to help you manage your financials like QuickBooks Online or a web-based budgeting software, or you call a friend who seems to really excel at marketing on Instagram Reels and you offer to buy them a coffee in exchange for some support because you just don't get it. Maybe you decide to stop hitting your head against the wall and hire a web designer to finish that online store you're trying to DIY. What would it look like if you could reach for whatever support that allows you to focus on what brought you to this business, allows you to focus on your art? I'd love to know your thoughts here. Go ahead and type in the chat, what would you do with that time for your work? I'm going to awkwardly wait in silence here to see if anybody has anything to share. I have some ideas just to get you started. Maybe in that time, you would learn how to do something new. Yes, learn new techniques and finish works. Focus on what I flourish in. Spend more time with my family. Exactly. Beautiful. I love it. Jane, we'll get to those questions here. I'm going to go over one more slide. Okay, so I've taken a broad stroke to cover business practices this afternoon, but I want to leave you with some actionable items. So you can pick one of these to do immediately and work through them as your schedule allows. Ideally, you get to all of them. I don't want you to be overwhelmed. Maybe you screenshot this list and come back to it. But here's some ideas. 1, write that unique value proposition. Again, remember, it's just a fancy word or a fancy phrase for writing down what makes you unique. Why do your customers come to you? If you're feeling stuck, looking on Google at other people's UVPs could be really helpful. Another option, define who you're selling to and create a profile of your customer. So this doesn't have to be anything fancy. Again, by this, I just mean write down a list with pen and paper of the characteristics you know to be true about your ideal customer. Where do they live? What do they like? How do they spend their free time? How do they spend their money? What's important to them? Another option, make a date with your financials. Take some time to look at what you're spending, where you're spending it, and how that's affecting your bottom line. Make this practice consistent and take action on next steps as they come up. So maybe those next steps are opening that separate bank account or exploring online accounting software to help you. Or maybe you recognize that you'd much rather call a local accountant for support. Whatever you do is better than pretending it's not there. Next, practice that elevator speech. Write down something short and sweet that you use to introduce yourself and your work to those that you meet at shows, friends at gatherings, business owners that maybe you're pitching collaboration with, or just strangers you run into on the streets. Think of this as more conversational, but still concise. It doesn't need to be more than a couple sentences, just enough to create intrigue if you have a few moments on an elevator with a potential customer or partner. And last but not least, take one thing off your plate. Scan your list of business to-dos and find one thing to reach for support or hire out. Maybe that's a search engine optimization program you've been dreading diving into, or installing new lighting in your workspace. Could you hire these jobs out instead, or ask a friend or your spouse for help? Or maybe you press pause on something that you're holding yourself accountable for. Maybe you've been trying to DIY a rebrand, but what if instead you focused on cleaning up your financials for the year and pushed that DIY rebrand to a later date? You know what feels burdensome for you and where you can realistically release control. So take some time to alleviate yourself of the pressure to do it all. I promise you are worth the help. With that, I'm going to go ahead and get to these questions. So go ahead and type those in that Q&A section. And while you do that, I'm going to go over some quick information. If you're interested in getting some individualized business counseling, you can reach out to our business counselor, Jonathan Howdyshell, whose information is here on the top. Or if you have any questions about today's presentation or want to reach out to me, my information is on the bottom. And of course, remember, you can go to wyomingwomen.org to learn more and sign up to be a client with that sign up now button at the top of the screen. The Wyoming Women's Business Center is made possible through several partnership agencies. Our primary funding comes from the U.S. Small Business Administration and the Wyoming Business Council. We're so thankful for the support and the guidance of these partners and look forward to the work that we get to do ahead. And I also want to remind you that the WWBC is a standalone 501c3 nonprofit. And every donation made to our organization is tax deductible and goes directly to our mission of empowering Wyoming's entrepreneurs and artists, especially women, through our counseling, training, and microfinance programs. If you feel this webinar was valuable to you, I encourage you to go to our website and consider a micro gift. Your $5 or $10 gift could make a difference in the programming we can offer and the number of entrepreneurs we can help. So lastly, before we hop into those questions, if you enjoyed today's training, you can find more of our upcoming, always free webinars at wyomingwomen.org. You can click the training tab to see what's ahead and to register. And remember, if you can't make a live event, no stress. All registrants always receive a link to the recording in their inbox to watch as schedules allow. We have another full month of really great content on financials, business planning, marketing, and much more, and a ever-expanding business education program unfolding in this new year. I had a heck of a time getting all of these on the screen, which is a good problem for both of us. So I encourage you to keep an eye on this page. One more thing, and then we're going to hop into questions. If you've considered selling your work at the Works of Wyoming store, the call for artists opens February 1st, which is next week. So Works of Wyoming is a brick and mortar store here in downtown Laramie. However, it is also an online store that ships nationwide. It's part of WWBC's Artist Development Program, and we're pleased to share that 2021 was a record-breaking sales year for the store, thanks to the beautiful work of Wyoming's artists. As I said, the call for artists opens on February 1st. And if you're interested in learning more, feel free to pop your name in the chat or just keep an eye on our social media. We'll be in touch soon with those details when that application goes live next week. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and pop into those questions. So Sharon asks, what kinds of help can you give or direct us to for setting up websites and web sales? And are there any micro grants for that kind of help? So for setting up websites and web sales, a place that I would really suggest starting is the WWBC's YouTube channel. We have lots of recordings of webinars on there, including those that address different setups for websites and online stores. So you could get familiar with the platforms and have an idea of where you would like to host your website, if you want it to be on Shopify or Wix or whatever that looks like. And then from there, you can decide if you feel like it's something you want to DIY or hire out. So that would be my suggestion for starting. As far as grants for that kind of help, I am unaware at this moment, but if I think of anything, I'll be sure to reach out. So Jane, I know you had a question. I'm just trying to find it in the chat again. Okay, is Works of Wyoming online? Yes, it is. Does one have to be in the Laramie Gallery? I believe that your work will be both in the brick and mortar store and online. That's a question we'd have to chat with our retail manager about. But the entry period starts on February 1st and it goes until March. So my suggestion would be to keep an eye out for that application, and you can get in touch with the retail manager so she can answer those more specific questions. Do I search YouTube for Yeah, if you just go to YouTube and type Wyoming Women's Business Center, you'll find our channel. I don't think there's a tour of the shop on YouTube, though. That sounds like a really great thing that maybe we should do. Do I have a list or network of businesses that you can refer people to? Cassie, if you want to go ahead and shoot me an email, I can send you a list of what I have and help you brainstorm. All right, well, with that, I'm going to wrap things up. So as I said, when we close a webinar today, a survey will pop up on your screen. It's just a quick 6-question survey, and I ask that you stay online and complete it for us. We do read each of these, and it helps us plan our upcoming calendar and improve our offerings. Thank you all so much for attending today's webinar and being so engaged and asking such good questions on what maybe was your lunch. I look forward to seeing you all again soon.